Hello everyone! As you know, I am Lacey, this is Lieutenant Dan, and you are watching Reptiles. Now, in today's little video, we are going to be talking about a creature that I have learned a lot about this week because they're fascinating. They are so freaking cool. We are learning about marine iguanas! Yay, marine iguanas! He is very into these marine iguanas. See that? He's like invested. Lieutenant Dan is invested in marine iguanas. So, marine iguanas, they come to us from the Galapagos Islands. It is the only place in the world where they live. They're the only lizard in the world that can live on the ocean and live in the ocean. They're the only ones who actively seek out the ocean for their food. Now, most iguanas, most lizards, I believe they're carnivorous, omnivorous. They'll eat lots of bugs, they'll eat lots of fruit, they'll eat vegetables, all these things. Not the marine iguana. No. The marine iguana, they survive on algae. Literal algae. And these guys can get a couple feet long, like I think like 2-3 feet, something like that. So these iguanas, they live off of algae that grows on the rocky shores of the various islands of the Galapagos. And each island of the Galapagos has their own subspecies of marine iguana due to, say it with me now, evolution. Thanks, Darwin. And Darwin himself has described, I think, 5 of these species, something like that. There's like 11 total species. Maybe he described 6 and 5 were just recently discovered. Something like that. There's a handful of subspecies, but each island basically has its own subspecies, which is kind of cool. And they have differences in size, in mating coloration, all this stuff. And marine iguanas, they have some crazy adaptations to surviving on the Galapagos Islands. They're the most remote islands in the world. And everything there has some pretty cool features. So one that I was like, oh my gosh, like blew my mind was during typically like El Niño years, which if you don't know what an El Niño is, go find like Ryan Hall here on YouTube, and I'm pretty sure he explains what an El Niño is. During an El Niño year, or any other time where there's less algae growth on the rocks on the shores of the Galapagos Islands, their bodies can shrink up to 20%. I'm talking like weight, length, everything can shrink up to like 20% to account for their lost food source, which is insane. And then when the algae comes back later in the year, they gain all that size back. Like, can you imagine if you're like, man, I'm real hungry. I've been real hungry for a while. Let me just shrink myself real quick to reduce my caloric requirements. Amazing. Amazing. Is that not amazing, Daniel? He doesn't have an opinion. He's just like, whatever, I'm in a dress. I'm cool. Now, another really cool thing about marine iguanas, and I think I've mentioned this about a creature previously, but I'm not sure on like another video, but marine iguanas, because they're eating this algae from the rocks and they're diving underwater and they're swimming, they're doing all this stuff. A lot of times they're eating underwater. They're bound to take in some salt water, right? So their body is crazy. Their blood partially gets filtered through these glands on their in their nose. They get filtered through these glands in their nose. And those glands collect the salt from the blood and they sneeze it out. Sneezy, salty boys. So they'll have like a little salt crust on their nose, which is kind of cute and really cool, so they don't die from too much salt intake. Isn't that right, Daniel? Do you have an opinion, sir? He does not. And in addition to them swimming in the water, it's not just swimming in the water. They can dive real deep. They can dive, 20 meters? 20 meters underwater, 65 feet up at least, which is crazy. That's real far. 65 feet. 65 feet! That's like a semi-truck trailer, and these are like little 2-3 foot guys. That's so freaking cool. And they can hold their breath and be underwater for like 30 minutes at a time. I challenge you to try that. With supervision. Don't don't just like hold your breath underwater with no supervision. You could hurt yourself. Don't do that. But can you imagine being able to hold your breath for 30 minutes? Shoot. Cool. How cool is that? Also, they can go down to the bottom, dig their little claws into the soil and hang onto rocks and just graze on seagrass and algae, which is so cool. Take that, manatees. Take that. Now, marine iguanas, they can live for about 5 to 10 years is about their lifespan-ish. So not a super long-lived animal like Lieutenant Dan here. That's a decent lifespan in the wild. That's not so bad. Living the good life in the Galapagos. So of course, in that 5 to 12 years, they gotta mate. They gotta make babies. They gotta make friends. You have an opinion? He does not. So the cool thing is on the different islands, the coloration changes during mating season in the males. Now, juveniles and females, they are pretty much just black all the time. But on the islands of Floriana and Hispaniola, the males during breeding season, they turn a bright green and bright red during mating season, which is kind of cool. Normally they're black and drab, and then between the months of January and March, they're just like, hello, I'm fabulous. Make babies with me. I like to think that that's how they do it. And then, on the island of Santa Cruz, they turn red and black. So they're a little more goth, a little more punky, you know? Trying to be like, yeah, I'm edgy. I'm just going to accessorize my natural melanistic ways. A little bit of splash of red in there. And then on Fernandina Island, it's similar to Hispaniola and Floriana Island, but instead of being these bright colors, they're like a dull green and a brick red. They don't want to be too flashy about it, you know. They're a little more conservative in their color change, and you know, they don't want to be like those wild kids over on Hispaniola, because obviously wildly the children on Hispaniola be crazy. Now I don't know that for a fact. That's me interpreting what I would imagine a marine iguana thinks and or does. I don't know. Now, what they'll do is another one of their really cool adaptations is like in the morning, they will go out and they'll bask on the rocks and the shores, catching up that sweet, sweet sunshine. And they'll get their energy because they're cold-blooded. They're ectothermic, meaning they get their body heat and they keep their temperature from external forces, like in Daniel's case, a radiant heat panel or my arm. And they absorb this and it gets their body temperature up so they can move and groove and go. So these marine iguanas, they're doing their thing. They're basking. And they'll get up to the correct temperature to where they can go out and forage for their algae. But when they get in the water, their heart rate drops by half. So they cut their heart rate in half in order to conserve energy. So they can keep their body heat longer, and they're not radiating that heat out into the water. And they can forage for algae longer. It's so cool. They're so well attuned to their environment. It's wild. It's so cool. I love it. Because they're cool. Now, this is the first lizard we've talked about on this channel. Not that I don't like lizards. I'm a little more obsessed with snakes. But I figured I didn't know anything about the marine iguana. And I was like, you know what? Let's learn about marine iguanas. They seem kind of cool. Daniel's got me in the cuffs here. Oh, he's going to be a necklace now. But yeah, that's it. That is today's episode, talking about marine iguanas. If you liked that video, share it with your friends. Let me know in the comments below what you thought was really cool. Subscribe even, perhaps. That would be really cool. Daniel would love that. He might be running away, but I promise he would love that. But until next time, friends, have a good week. Make smart choices. Make wise choices. And never stop learning, because a mind is a terrible thing to waste. See ya! My guy, I'm trying to talk about algae. Bro, look at this guy. He's just sniffing Dan. And Dan's just like, bruh, you're ruining the shot. Oh, yeah, he's a voyeuristic cat. He likes to show you his butt because he's weird. Isn't he, Lieutenant Dan? Do you mind? This cat has been sitting here for a solid, 5 minutes, and he's just giving me bonks. Lumpy, hey, can I get a bonk? Oh, yeah. He gives bonks. He's pretty cool. Sir. Sir. That is my dress. What are... Boob noodle. Alright, now you're on the mic. I don't know that this is gonna work. Had to take the mic off because Lieutenant Dan has decided he wants to wear a pretty dress. He wants to be a pretty boy in a pretty dress. Isn't that right, Daniel? So that's fun. And I don't think you want to hear him slithering all over my mic. Although, I don't know, maybe he's trying to start his own ASMR thing. Who knows?